68% of women and girls believe if they see themselves visually represented, it encourages them to try a new sport. That's why, to help inspire the next generation of female cricketers and drive further visibility of women's sports, Metrobank and the ECB have created a new photography bank of high-quality images of women's and girls' cricket. The images will be accessible to local cricket clubs free of charge via the ECB Resource Hub, with professional standard imagery available to use across their websites and social channels to assist with the formation of new teams and recruitment of players. To find out more, check the link in the description. Hello and welcome to the Wisden Women's Cricket Weekly podcast. We are rounding up the One Day Cup this week, looking at a fascinating series between two of the World Cup favourites, India and Australia. And we hear from Tammy Beaumont and the umpire, Anna Harris, about how she balances being a doctor and being a leading international umpire. I'm Yas Rana, and with me today are Katya Witney and Ben Gardner. But first, let's head to Lauren Winfield-Hill. Lauren, first of all, congratulations. Yorkshire won the Tier 2 One Day Cup. It turned into a 20-over game because of the weather. You guys chased down 127 in 11 and a bit overs. Am I right in saying that it was agreed to be a 20-over game fairly early on, in the knowledge that it was going to hose it down later?
Yeah, so it was pretty much the 24 hours before it. When we were travelling down the day before, in the morning, Rich called me to the front of the bus and was like, this is something that the two directors of cricket were discussing with the ECB, and it hadn't been signed off until the morning's play, but it was something that was in the pipeline, because you could sort of see that the focus was like basically the world's going to end at about lunchtime. So because there's no reserve day, you could just see it. Like, I was just like, win the toss, bowl first, bowl your 50 overs, grind out in the field, and then you don't get a bat, which is just the worst day ever. But yeah, common sense prevailed, which doesn't happen very often in cricket. And it literally, to a T, like when we were out there batting in the power play in the second innings, it sort of started to drizzle a bit. And we pretty much lifted the trophy in the heavens open. So we couldn't have timed it any better. And it wasn't really about like whether that makes the teams closer, or, you know, it's a bit more of a lucky dip with T20, but it was just both teams wanted a result, whether you won or lost. You don't want to be, there was sort of murmurs of a bowl off, and then there was murmurs of, will you share the trophy? It's like, what, do you get one handle each? So yeah, common sense prevailed, which was mind-blowing.
Doesn't often happen in cricket, so you've got to savour it when it does happen. But it must be good for Yorkshire to get that bit of silverware.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you know, whether it's Tier 2 or not, I think it's nice to have a trophy in the cabinet. I think for the club as well, like, it wasn't necessarily the goal, but it's always nice to sort of reaffirm that you're on a decent trajectory with, well, I guess from where we were, from finding out we weren't in Tier 1 to now, and then pushing on to next year, I think it'll be pretty pleasing for the club that we've got something in the cabinet, and we played really well. Like, so I think, yeah, there's been no corners cut. Like, the way the support and stuff from the club has been unreal. The minute we found out we weren't in Tier 1, it's been all systems go to make sure that this year sets us up for next year. And I think that's just sort of a nice tick in that box, really.
Bit of news this week. Nick Friend at The Cricketer reporting that England will have an intra squad series in March in Abu Dhabi. 30 players flying out, separate squads, separate hotels, separate coaching staffs as well. There's a gap in the calendar between the end of the WPL and the T20 World Cup that's in England. Lauren, this sounds like a great idea.
Yeah, it is. It's something that we used to do a little bit under Mark Robinson, actually, back in the day, was the intra-squad series. Probably not as many measures as in different hotels. We always did it where it was like different coaching staff. You'd do your analysis, you know, you'd run it like a proper series, your meetings. You'd eat at different times and be in different kit, but you'd all be based at Loughborough sort of together. But yeah, I think it's a great idea. I think that separation is actually really, really cool to just sort of put a little bit more on it. And I think, the closer that you can get to international cricket, the better. And that sort of just helps create that little bit of mist between the two teams. And there'll be a lot on it. Like you're leading into a massive summer next year with the home World Cup. I think it's different pressures when you're playing internal games. There's a lot of comparison pressures with, all right, well, you've got 4 openers. How are they, how's your opposite number tracking? And just the sheer pressure of trying to put your name into the ring to be playing in that World Cup. I think it's a great idea. I think the standard will be arguably higher than playing against some of the international teams, and everybody there is in the shop window, isn't it? So I think it's a great idea. And like I say, I wouldn't be surprised if Charlotte's got it a little bit from how we used to go about things under Robbo with those because you can control the standard and the formats and everything. You can control that series a lot easier than you can playing against some of the bottom sort of half-ranked teams, really.
Yeah, a lot of people will look at England's schedule and wonder, well, hang on, why aren't England playing a bilateral series at that time? There's a big gap in the schedule. But I think that point's a crucial one, right? In 2024, when England had that home summer against New Zealand and Pakistan, people wondering, well, actually, what are England learning here right before a World Cup? I suppose, other than a series against Australia, India, or South Africa, this is as good as it's going to get.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, the whole thing with England is we know they can thrash the lower ranked teams. Like we've seen that. But when you're playing against the top 2-3 ranked teams, what does that look like? And I think this is a great way to control the standard. I think the other thing is that there is a lot of pressure on it, like that comparison piece of your opposite numbers. The other thing is, like, you can throw in things like you do a super over, or you have a delayed start, or we used to do things like that where you just throw in a chaos piece, because I think that's another bit is like you get very scripted and very structured. And actually, you can control things like that. They might do where there's a super over, or there's a shortened game, or there's an earlier start or a later start. Like if I was Lottie, I'd be throwing in little chaos nuggets as well. The other big thing I think in this is you've got 4 leaders. So the other piece is like, I guess for me is with that England team, there's the bit against the best teams in the world under pressure. But then there's also this leadership piece that's sort of come about a little bit since Heather obviously stepped down. Is like there's been a bit of neglect for leaders in England in terms of giving them the expo. Like, I guess the first bit is like identifying them, giving the exposure, and actually learning the job, whether that's working with other people, like other sports leadership, role models, whether it's people from the past, whatever that looks like. But you've got an opportunity there to have 2 captains and 2 vice captains. So I think that's another real plus in this as well.
No, it definitely sounds really exciting. Hopefully we'll be able to watch as much of it as we can. Over in India, it's currently 1-1 between India and Australia in a pre-World Cup ODI series. It's been really interesting so far. First game, Australia dominant, chasing 282, 2 down with 6 overs left. Big runs for Phoebe Litchfield. She scored 88, half centuries for Beth Mooney and Annabelle Sutherland. Then the second game was a bit different. Smriti Mandhana scored an extraordinary 100. Her 3 figures came off just 77 balls. It's the quickest ever ODI 100 scored against Australia. Gets them to 292. And Australia fall well short in the end. India winning by pretty much 100 runs. Kranti Good with more new ball wickets. We saw how good she was with a new ball against England. These two are the favourites for the tournament, but Australia, in most people's view, are favourites by quite a long way. Are we seeing signs of not necessarily vulnerabilities, but ways in which India, who are on this amazing upward trajectory, if you go back 12 months to when they toured Australia, I don't think people would have expected India to look like they are looking right now. And also worth saying that you could either spin this positively or negatively. India have fielded really badly in this series. There have been loads of drop catches. And even then, there is 1-1.
Yeah, I was only speaking about it last night, actually, in terms of, I was just talking about Georgia Voll and her rise, and then just have struggled since then, really. But it sort of led me back to that India series that I actually was working on commentary and watching, and they're completely different kettle of fish now. I mean, Australia was so dominant in that series, and that's where Georgia Voll, I guess, her meteoric rise started for Australia, and it's been a little bit lumpy and bumpy since then, hasn't it? She had a quiet 100 and failed to take her opportunity the other day. But I think Australia will hide from the fact that they'll say that they're giving people a go and they're resting players and they're bowling 8 bowlers, etc. But the bottom line is that India have played extraordinarily well, and fragility has been exposed. From whatever team you pick in that Australian, that 11, there's like nothing between them, so it doesn't actually make them any weaker. So I think they'll probably justify it by that, saying, well, they're giving up people opportunities, but I definitely think they've been exposed, and I think India are a lot more like India are in a really good spot going into this World Cup, big time. And I just feel sometimes with Australia is they've almost got too many players and too little roles. Like it's a bit of a free for all. Like I think for me is like what's somebody like Talia McGrath's role really? And then you sometimes fall into this trap where if you're bowling, if you use 8 bowlers, your best bowlers don't bowl their full quota, and then you end up sort of like a lot of bits and pieces overs. I think you made a good point in terms of the introduction of Alana King. It's like you're in Indian conditions. She's a wicket taker, and she's not bowling till the 34th over. Like whether that's a matchup against the left-hander or whatever. Again, it's just a bit bits and pieces. There's no real role clarity. I always say, like, if I'm a captain in a team, I want one spare bowler. So if somebody goes the distance, you want a spare bowler, and then you'll usually have a bit of a part-timer in there anyway. But when you have more than that, you end up not bowling your best bowlers on the day, their full quota. And I think that's what Australia, that's the trap that they can sometimes fall into.
Yeah, by having more bowlers doesn't mean you get to bowl more overs. And I do think it's difficult to work out exactly what they'll do in a Crunch World Cup game. But in terms of team balance, that's not that far off what they go for ordinarily. So it'll be interesting to see how that changes in a important World Cup game. But I agree with you. I think there is such a thing as having too many options with the ball. On Smriti Mandhana, that was an extraordinary innings, and she's on an extraordinary run of form. Since the start of 2024, she's played 26 ODIs, averaging pretty much exactly 60, striking at above 100, 700s and 650s in that 26 game streak. That result, I know it's a big winning margin in the end, but the scoreboard pressure Australia are under isn't possible without that Mandhana innings. And against the best team in the world, she was on a completely different level.
Yeah, 100%. I think when you just read those numbers, it's mind blowing, isn't it? Really, I mean, there's probably not a player in this format of the game that's in better touch, men's or women's. That is unbelievable numbers. It's interesting as well because obviously the BCCI have kept a lot of the girls out of the 100 that were potentially earmarked and things like that, and it feels like there's a real focus and push on this World Cup and this this Indian side right now, and this format, I think as well, like playing more ODI cricket and framing, it is different. It's definitely different to T20s, and she's obviously found a tempo. I think that's the key in one day cricket, a tempo of sort of setting your innings up and then going through the gears. And I remember when she was over in England, and she was saying that, the girls had been giving her a stick about sort of jibbing a few hundreds. And then she was sort of laughing about it and pointing to the dugout and it's like an appetite, isn't it? It's like an addiction for going big. And I think that she's obviously got that taste in her mouth at the minute. And the other thing is as well, that side was without Jemmy Rodrigues, who's massive in that middle order. And it almost feels like Smriti is one of those players where when the responsibility is higher, when she was captain at Trent Bridge when Harmanpreet didn't play. You've got players missing. You obviously missed Jemmy in the middle order. So it almost feels like she rises to that. The thing with Mandana is she scores so quickly as well. So what that, it's not like she scored 100 off 140 balls and sort of anchored the innings. Like you're limped to like 240, 250 if other people don't come off around you. Whereas the tempo that she plays with, providing one or two go around her, you're always going to get sort of upwards of that 275.
Yeah, no, it's an amazing run of form, and you sort of think that with her in this sort of form, anything's possible really for India. But yeah, it's quite interesting to see the two tournament favourites playing each other in a series directly before the tournament. I wonder if at some level as well they don't want to show too much in terms of what they've got in the locker at the moment as well.
Yeah, I feel like those sort of series before like major tournaments it's always a funny one because you want to get into the habit of winning and competing. Like if it's just a warm up, if you're just seeing it as a warm up game, you don't get the same intensity and get the same performance. But equally, you sort of want to keep a few cards close to your chest. But I just think nowadays that sort of, it's not really a thing as much because there's so much information out there. Everybody knows absolutely everything about every player. You've got so much footage. Like nothing's really ever a surprise. I guess what the only thing would be with it sort of feels like the Aussie bowlers in particular are a bit like on a trial of, all right, well, who are we sort of going for here? How do we get everybody in to make sure that it's not just a free for all?
Yeah, well, it's fascinatingly poised. Only 10 days to go until the start of the World Cup. Let's leave it there for this week, Lauren. See you next time. So we know who the One Day Cup finalists are. Two brilliant semi-finals this week. Lancashire defending 241 against the Blaze, doing so by just 5 runs. Ailsa Lister and Ellie Threlkeld putting on 166 for the 5th wicket after Lancs were 52 for 4. Catherine Bryce's 100 kept the Blaze interested, but they fell just short. And then in the other semi-final yesterday, Hampshire chased down 288 at home to Surrey. Georgia Adams scored 107 not out from 101 from number 3. Freya Kemp hit 50 off just 29 to get them way ahead of the rate early on in the chase. And then the youngster Mary Taylor, known more for her bowling than her batting, hit 60 not out herself to get them over the line at the end. So 2 great semi-finals. The final promises to be extremely exciting as well. Before we go into picking our team of the tournament, we've all picked one each. Katya, what do you think overall about the tournament more generally? Obviously, the first 50 over competition in the new structure, success?
I think you have to rate it as a success. I mean, particularly, I know Ben's going to go into detail about the first bit of the competition, but having the block where those England players were available was genuinely incredible cricket. Like you were going down to these, we've said it before, we're going down to these outgrounds and seeing these world-class players playing huge amount of runs scored. And I actually think having the pitches and the conditions so flat at the start really helped because you saw, teams putting on 350 and then sides getting close to chasing it down or actually chasing it down. So I think that part of it was a success, but there is stuff that I think you could say what didn't quite work. So I think having so much of it at outgrounds early in the season, I know we've said before the schedule is so tricky, but that is something that needs to be looked at as to how you get more of that on main grounds, but also how you then advertise the competition a bit better to get people coming down to those outgrounds. I don't think it's kind of cut through in the way the ECB were hoping it might cut through, that you have like Elise Perry and Tammy Beaumont and Susie Bates at these grounds that you might just stumble across and you can come and watch them for free. And I don't think that's quite made or got right to the top of the kind of narrative in the way that the ECB hoped it would do. I think we don't have official crowd numbers or attendance numbers, but I think they might be slightly below potentially what the ECB were expecting. So yeah, I think there's kind of pros and cons in terms of the cricket on the field and some of the other stuff. And next year it's changing a bit as well. And we won't get that block at the start of the season when the England players are available either, because the international summer starts so much earlier next year. And then you've also got the T20 World Cup, which is going to take them away. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it develops next year, and what the scheduling is like for that, I guess.
Ben?
Yeah, I think I'd agree with a lot of that. I think the two work-ons would be having England players available for more of it. And also, yeah, I guess it's the scheduling thing is tricky from another point of view, but I would like to see more of the One Day Cup played in June and July if possible. I think you had just the 2 days of One Day Cup cricket in July, and obviously none in August as well with the 100 going on. And I think there can be a sort of a feeling with English domestic cricket across both men's and women's cricket that the only type of cricket you can sort of attract people to come watch in big numbers is T20 cricket. And actually, I think that one day cricket, like when you get it right, can just be such a good day out, basically. And also, when you've made this point before, but when the touring summer, obviously India, that was very high quality cricket. But actually, England versus West Indies or a game of tier one county cricket, what's going to be probably higher quality and more like to be a better game of cricket? Actually, it's the latter, and you have some absolutely brilliant cricketers on show there. And you can also sometimes think the outgrounds thing, you can go both ways, because these are things that are often in quite big towns or places that have quite a lot of people living around them, right? Like, but Beckenham, sure, it's sort of out of the way in London, but a lot of people live around there. Like if you can get...
Well, I think this is around the I guess the promotion of some of the games, and this isn't necessarily, I don't think this is an ECB thing. I think this is actually counties believing in the product a little bit more. I saw a lot of people say for when Durham played Surrey at Beckenham, hang on, there's a game with Susie Bates playing really close to where I live, and I had no idea.
Yeah.
I think that sort of thing can be improved on next year.
And once you have the fans who are coming in, that kind of base, you can actually almost, even at an outground, you can sort of, like, because actually outgrounds, if you're like a family coming with like, some younger kids, that can actually be a better experience than coming to like a big ground with those people in the stands. That's where you can have like your bouncy castle in your face, or almost like a town fete sort of feel. I think can actually be I can see there being a much better way to sell these games, which like isn't happening at the moment. Kash saying that her dad just rocking up at Guildford, getting out his deck chair to watch Elise Perry bat, like sort of great that he can do that, but also kind of almost shouldn't be that easy,
But would we get Susie Bates on the bouncy castle if we had that bouncy castle? I also think that on the marketing thing, I think that is kind of the biggest disappointment on a county side, because when we were talking about this switch to tier one last year from the RHF and the regional system, we made the point that the regional system basically just hadn't been marketed by the regional hubs. And part of that was that no one really knew who was responsible for them. So you had Vipers who were based at Hampshire, but they weren't quite Hampshire. And it was kind of confusing as to who was responsible for drawing in the crowds for these teams. But now you've got counties who are very clearly responsible for that marketing, and it hasn't been quite as effective or as prioritized as perhaps it should be. And the one thing we were saying when these changes were being made was, yes, you can make these changes, it has to be marketed properly. And it doesn't quite feel like that's been happening.
Right, let's get into it. Teams of the tournament. We've all picked each of our own. Ben, do you want to go first?
No, I don't, because what I did is I basically picked holes in both of your teams rather than like I've got players who I want to see in, but I want to just be part of the debate.
You don't know my team.
Sorry, I picked holes in Katya's team. Sorry.
Thanks, that's great.
Katya, I suppose you've got to go first then.
Pick holes in Susie Bates and Emma Lamb as an opening partnership then.
I actually do have, because
Really?
with Susie Bates, she was obviously brilliant, averaging 50, striking 90. The thing was is that I felt, who's not in your team, I wanted to have Georgia Adams in there, who's captain of one of the sides in the final, not got sort of the dynamism of some of the other batters, but was also taken 14 wickets, I think, and one of the innings of the competition, that 100 in the semi-final. And I was looking at like, where could you fit her into that side? And almost Bates has perhaps the slightly least compelling record of any of those guys. I mean, she's averaged a bit more and struck a bit more than Catherine Bryce, but Bryce got a few more runs, having played a few more games. And also, you want to find a balance these teams of like picking the players who are obviously going to be brilliant and the players who I don't know. So yeah. Possibly.
So Adams gets in for you with a strike rate of 71.
Well, it's the combination of the captaincy, the innings of the semi-final, and the wickets as well. Basically, like as a player, I feel like she has had a competition that maybe she could be included, but I guess that's why these things are fun debates.
But as an opener,
the thing is she's one I feel like she warrants to be in there. And if I look down the middle order, I've got as all rounders. I mean, I guess this team maybe doesn't need 9 bowling options. But if I'm leaving out one of my top 6, I'm looking at actually who hasn't bowled much, and that would be Bates, whereas the others have also all had brilliant campaigns of the ball, apart from Emma Lamb, who is far and away the the leading run scorer. So that's why I'd kind of fudged Adams in as opener in my team. But I admit that Adams is not as good a player as Susie Bates. So I feel like I might be outvoted there, but I feel like we should have put the case forward. And it might be as well that when it comes to after the final, we see it different if she's played another innings.
Yeah, we should say this is a penciled in 11, that if someone does something absolutely outrageous in the final, we can reconsider selections. I don't think you've effectively picked a hole in that opening partnership with Lamb and Bates. I'm still going with Lamb and Bates are my two openers. Susie Bates, when you look at Durham, so they've not had her available for the last 3 rounds and they've lost all 3 of those games. And then Emma Lamb is by far and away the standout batter from the competition. Got an England recall off the weight of runs she scored in the first few rounds. And beyond the century she scored, if you look at the halves, she scored 6 half centuries in the competition. Those half centuries were all, the majority of them were 80 plus scores as well. When she gets in, she really gets in and goes big. And that's part of the reason why she's so appealing to England now. And I don't think you can break up that Bates-Lamb partnership. Big fan of Georgia Adams, big fan of what she does at Hampshire. She's not getting it over Susie Bates or Emma Lamb.
I'm with you on that one. And then middle order, we're pretty much aligned. So can I hear, let's go Katya first. Katya, you're 3 to 6 and we'll do keeper later.
So I've got Catherine Bryce, Alice Davidson-Richards, Georgia Elwys and Amanda Jade Wellington as my middle order, which I'm pretty happy with.
Yeah.
Catherine Bryce was in there before the century she scored in the semi-final, but after that century, she was kind of completely solidified in that lineup. Over 50% of the runs in that semi-final she scored, and she took Blaze really, really close to winning that game. So Georgia Elwys scored 50 in that innings, but no other Blaze batter got more than 14. I think it's pretty self-explanatory. She's also been decent with the ball as well. So she's in. ADR was picked more for kind of the consistency that she's had at Surrey. The England recall is part of that narrative. But after, if you look at her last 2 seasons, after quite a quiet 2023, she had a pretty good 2024, and then she's had a standout, I think, 2025. So she's in there at 4. Elwys, we had her on the podcast much earlier in the summer, but she moved from Vipers up to Blaze this season. I think she's probably the best signing of this season. The innings she played against Surrey at Beckenham, which I'll come on to later as well, was absolutely outstanding. She came in, basically peppered the mid-wicket boundary, and then came on with the ball and took 3 wickets as well. So she's been another standout. And then Amanda Jade Wellington, again, I think I'm biased to people I've seen. I'm basically biased to people I've seen play well either for Surrey or against Surrey.
Well, it'd be weird if it was the other way around.
Yeah, pretty much. But yeah, Amanda Jade Wellington, she was absolutely amazing in the first game she played off the plane, I think, against Surrey.
The tied game to get it all going.
The tied game. No, the tied game.
Oh, no. Was it a tie? Or
No,
the game they won off the last ball.
The game they won off the last ball.
On the day where there was also a tie.
That's it, yeah.
That's it. But yeah, she was absolutely amazing. And yeah, her record over the last couple of years in franchise cricket and domestic stuff is really, really good. And she also gave a really interesting interview to Cricinfo a few weeks ago where she talked about she's not really bothered about playing for Australia, and for her now franchise cricket and domestic cricket is the pinnacle of where she's at. So she's a really interesting character as well.
So I've gone Freya Kemp, even though she's only played 5 games. Her record is basically unlike anyone else's. Players have scored more runs, but she's averaging above 50, but she's striking 110. And that innings she played yesterday against Surrey, it's a sort of innings very, very few players in the country have played this season, where a middle order player has just completely changed the game, not by the volume of runs that they've scored, but the tempo at which they've scored. And she's had a horrendous run of injuries. And I think also we forget just how young she is. She played England stuff when she was 17, earmarked as the next gun all-rounder. I guess Nat Sivabrunt's heir. But even though she can't bowl at the moment because of injuries, I think as a batter, she's really exciting. We saw glimpses of it in the 100, where probably more so than any other England player or English player around that age, she's a game changer in the middle order. So even though she's not played a lot, she makes my team.
Yeah, I mean, her numbers are totally mad because after that innings yesterday, it's averaging 64, striking 130. That is mad. But actually, Wellington she has a strike at just under 140. That's the best strike rate of anyone in the competition with over 100 runs and also 18 wickets to go with it. So like that was Wellington for me. But also it's in basically every other point, I've basically gone for players who've helped their team get to the business end of the tournament or done something in those semi-finals. I think I've been quite tilted that way. And just one more stat on David Richards, look at the strike rate as well. For anyone with 300 runs, she's the only person to score more than the runner ball, and she's done it while averaging 66. So pretty impressive competition from her.
Keeper.
Yeah, so this is again a bit tilted towards knockout cricket. I've gone with Ellie Threlkeld, whose highest score of the competition was 92 in that semi-final win for Lancs. Now again, if you're throwing the sort of the barb at George Adams that she's not scoring quick enough, Threlkeld's strike rate of 71 is almost identical, and maybe you'd say that batting down that middle order, you want it to be that bit higher. But also, I think it's interesting that there isn't a standout wicket keeper basically across. There's a few in the sort of 300 run sort of bracket, but no one who's had like a standout competition. That kind of shows you where English cricket is at a bit. But yeah, Threlkeld's the one for me, averaging 42, albeit with 5 not outs in there, and a brilliant innings in the game that has mattered most so far for Lancashire before the final.
How'd you go, Katya?
I went with Rihanna Southby. I feel like the keeper discussion is probably the most interesting selection point in this team. And then when you look at, as Ben says, the overall like arc of English women's cricket is one of the most interesting threads that's going to unfold over the next couple of years. Because we had that period under John Lewis when it was Bess Heath, who was the next keeper off the ranks after Amy Jones, particularly in the T20 stuff. And I think, and it's been reported that is now Rihanna Southby, who is that next cab off the rank below, for England, below Amy Jones and then Tammy Beaumont as well. And we've talked about Southby a lot, and it's always been that accusation of her that she's a brilliant keeper, best keeper in the country, but she doesn't bat well enough to get in the England side. When Ella McCacken got injured for Hampshire, it was Rihanna Southby who they picked to open. She came into bat above Elise Perry in the second part of the One Day Cup. And if you're talking about strike rates, Southby struck at 82 in the competition. She averaged slightly less, but she was opening with Maya Bouchier. And I watched an innings she played at Guildford. She didn't get many runs. She got 20, 30 odd, but she absolutely whacked it in a way that I didn't actually think she could. And even before she was opening, she was batting in Hampshire's top 5 when McCacken was in the side. And her arc as a player, I think, is on a very upward trajectory in terms of batting at the minute. And I think she is probably the best rounded pick for a keeper at the minute in the country.
Well, I think also it's really interesting because the best keeper to come in for 50 over cricket might be different to the best person for T20 cricket. So sort of combining this conversation, the one we're about to have later, we were asked to pick our breakout star of the summer. And I thought just because of how interesting it is in terms of who's England's next keeper going to be and how that potentially, depending on how this winter goes and how the World Cup goes next year, that could be something that changes in the next 12 months. I thought it was interesting just looking at how there wasn't a standout next cab off the rank. So I thought Kira Chatley had a really interesting summer. Standout knock this week in the One Day Cup semi-final, but other than that, actually had quite a poor One Day Cup, but she impressed in both the Blast and the 100, opening the batting, doing well for London Spirit. She was in a lot of people's team of the tournament for the 100. So that's quite interesting. And then also, I guess you've got Seren Smale, who was picked to keep wicket for England against Ireland last year. She's only 20, 21, but she doesn't keep wicket because Threlkeld does the job for Lancs. So it's not immediately obvious who the next cab off the rank actually is. I mean, even if you look at Surrey in particular, this week, 19-year-old Jemima Spence hit 68 in their last group stage game. If you speak to people around the club, they think she's extremely exciting, very high potential, but she hasn't been able to. Well, she hasn't been able to get in the park because of injury this year. She had an ACL injury, so she made her first appearance of the summer in September. But you've got 2 players who are really good with the gloves at the same club, and if you only have 8 professional teams, it's quite hard to give opportunities to other players. and a lot of the keepers have had good but not like totally brilliant seasons that would get them to the front of the queue. So another one, Wraith at Warwickshire, she struck at 98 in the One Day Cup, which is interesting, but also only averaged 26. So I find that whole discussion very, very interesting.
And interesting what's happened at Warwickshire as well, with Freeborn keeping basically for half the season and then Wraith for half the season, despite them both playing in all their games pretty much. And which again shows that I don't know if that's a thing where they're trying to juggle it around, or if they've just taken a different view of who their best keeper is through the season. But
yeah. Bowling attack. Ben, do you want to go first?
Yes. So this was again an area where I wanted to make sure to look at players who'd had impact, and also not to overly penalise players who had done so well that they then got called up for England and then missed some games. So I've got Lindsay Smith and Em Arlott. Should we start there? Who I think that they both fit into that category. And when you just look down the numbers of average and economy rates, those two really just stand out, even though they're not up there in terms of overall wickets, because they've only played 7 or so games, and they were
Smith
not
under fours in a very high scoring season.
And players who were not being, maybe talked about as like the app, or like, they're obviously in the England conversation thereabouts, but really advanced their cases to the extent that they end up being, big parts of the England squad moving forward. So they're two of mine. Yeah.
Katya?
I've gone with Smith. Completely self-explanatory. She only played 7 matches and is still in the top 10 wicket takers in the season. I didn't have Em Arlott, although she came quite close to being in. I did have Georgia Davis, who's the leading wicket taker in the competition overall, and a real standout in a Warwickshire team that has a lot of young players in it, and has the makings of what could be a really good side, but isn't quite there yet. They lost a few senior names when they were in the transition from being Central Sparks to being Warwickshire, including Eve Jones, who went on loan to Lancashire and then back to Lancashire, and that was a really, really big loss for them. And basically they have no proper senior players in that side. They've got Amu Kumar, who was, I think, again, she doesn't quite have a case for being a breakout star, but watching her play a couple of innings, I'm really interested to see where and she develops, because she wasn't batting high up, and then she played in innings at the Oval that meant that Warwickshire pushed her up the order. But yeah, she's really exciting. And then Hannah Baker as well has been spoken about very highly ever since that Under-19 World Cup. Played a couple of ODIs, I think, in the Island Series before the T20 World Cup last year. But they need senior players in that side to balance that out. So they've got a lot of promising youngsters. But Georgia Davis has been the standout in that side, so I selected her. And then I've also gone for Grace Bollinger, who has been basically Blaze's pretty much best bowler over the last few seasons, and she's been a massive part of why they've been so successful in 50-over cricket. So she was their leading wicket taker in the 2023 RHF, and then she took 28 wickets across both the RHF and the Charlotte Edwards Cup last season. She had a really good 100 this year as well, and then did really well in the Blast. So yeah, she's also in that team.
All my picks are covered now. Ben, have you got anyone else?
Well, just some names to say. I mean, Katie Levick we haven't mentioned, but third in the wicket takers list, going at 4.5 and over, is pretty impressive. And just two things that I found, and also Freya Davis, I think we could be having a different conversation after the final. She's got 18 wickets. She could easily be in that 20 wicket club, and her overall numbers are just impressive, going again about 4.5 and over. I thought it was interesting that Lancashire don't have anyone in the top 10 wicket takers despite being in the final, but have 7 bowlers who've got double figures for wickets, which is sort of mad. Some teams only have 2 or 3, and no one else got more than 5. And also that if we were actually picking this side, sort of construct a sort of super squad for the tournament, you would probably actually end up having your keeper at 8, because as we've got it, our number, if Wellington is our 6, our numbers 3 to 6 have all also got as double figures for wickets this season, which means that we are just going to have so many bowling options no matter who we pick, which is why Em Arlott as well, just with that 100 she got, which was brilliant, which won the England's competition.
Similar to the conversation about there not being a standout wicketkeeper, I think there were also a deficit of standout new ball bowling options. So Em Arlott, we've obviously seen that how effective she is as a middle over bowler, uses cut as well. But Phoebe Turner, who is always at the top of the wicket-taking lists in 50-over cricket. She's very young at Durham, but in the Rachel Hayo Flint Trophy, she did very well as well. She's not really a new ball bowler as well. Another amazing tournament. I'm not saying that one is more important than the other, but again, it is interesting that if you look through the wicket-taking list, there isn't exactly a standout new ball 50 over bowler who's not already in the England squad. But you picked Phoebe Turner in your 11.
Yeah, I did pick Phoebe Turner. I think looking at that Durham side, I think has pretty underperformed quite a bit this season when you look at who they've got. So in that bowling attack, as well as Susie Bates, they've also got Katie Levick, Maddie Villiers and Catherine Fraser in the bowling attack. Holly Armitage, who was one of the leading run scorers in the competition. And Phoebe Turner was their standout bowler. And like you said, she's always at the top of the list for these List A competitions. And it feels like we consistently don't talk about her. But yeah, she did make my side. When I was selecting, I wasn't thinking that this is going to be a team that actually play. I was more thinking, well, if necessary, give Grace Bollinger the new ball and
she is a really good new ball bowler, and that's why I picked her in my team, even though her numbers aren't as good as some other players. Is that she probably was the best over the whole competition, the best new ball bowler. But yeah. Breakout stars. So I sort of combined my 3, and we're doing this of the summer.
We just want to confirm what our 11 is.
Yeah, we should do that. I think we had we weren't completely in agreement. So I guess Wellington versus Kemp would be one.
I think we had 2 for Wellington, 1 for Kemp, and I think that's
cool.
Yeah.
So it is your team, Katya, I think.
Nice. So what? Bates, Lamb, Bryce. Wait, no, did we select Turner? Because I selected Turner.
No,
I think we're going MR
over Turner, yeah.
Damn.
And did we end up with Southby as keeper? I think.
I initially picked Southby, but then I was swayed, but also because Southby ended up opening and did really well opening, but she wouldn't be opening in our team.
No.
So that's why I think Threlkeld actually fits it slightly better.
I guess the tricky thing is I think there's probably...
Unless we pick her as a specialist keeper, this was a job she has also done.
Yeah, there might be 3 players who we change our minds on after the final as well, which would be Southey, Threlkeld, Freya Davies possibly, and I'm still going to say if George Adams has a standout final, I'm going to be banging that drum again.
You know what? Let's revisit this briefly next week, because if someone who we haven't even mentioned scores a double 100 in the final, we're probably picking them. So next up, Breakout star. This is of the summer, not just the One Day Cup. I've sort of told you mine is on balance Kira Chatley, because I thought that was the most game-changing in terms of the England conversation, I think. And I think English cricket was crying out for a keeper to have a standout high-profile 100 tournament, and that's what she did. It is worth saying that there is a correct answer here, who I haven't said yes, and Ben, the correct answer is...
It's Davina Perrin.
Whoa.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what more there is to say about her that you can't just go back and listen to previous episodes and hear. But yeah, I mean,
and her parents as well.
Yeah, I mean, she'd be the breakout, almost the breakout. Well, the breakout star of the 100 so far in some ways, having put on the performance of the 100 in that eliminator, just totally astonishing for someone of that age to do. And if you're looking for a star as well, she just has that star power. And it's going to be very, very exciting to watch that career unfold.
How many more people can we interview about Davina Perrin? Maybe we should set that as a challenge.
Yeah, that's good.
So by her England debut, how many interviews have we conducted? Not necessarily with Davina Perrin, but about Davina Perrin.
I reckon we could do Chevy Green at Ace. We haven't got him on the show yet.
Ebony Rainford Brent, maybe.
Yeah.
But you get this sometimes when like a new Roy, when
Michael Holding. They met when they were younger.
Viv.
Viv.
Get Viv on the pod.
Laura, we've got an in with Laura.
When there's like a royal wedding. And they want to do a profile of this fiance or something, but they obviously can't get access to them, and they'll just be interviewing whoever they can. It'll be like we spoke to Kate Middleton's hairdresser or to her milkman or something. Yeah, that's where you want to get to for Davina Perrin, and she is cricketing royalty now. So
Katya, put us out of our misery.
I've gone with a player who I don't know whether people will necessarily remember just how good she was, because she hasn't played for a long time, but I've gone with Ella McCacken.
Yeah.
Who completely dominated the opening couple of months of the summer and then got injured just as she was called up for England A, and hasn't played a game since. But she was the original, before Perrin came in and stole her thunder, she was the original breakout star of the summer. She scored 100 in the One Day Cup and then also scored 100 in the T20 Blast. I think that was the first 100 of the T20 Blast. And that 100 was her last innings of the summer.
Wow, that's brutal.
Yeah, that is brutal. So she went on if you just look at the Blast, she was also really good in the One Day Cup, but she went on a ridiculous run. She scored it's from her first innings to the final innings. She scored 68 not out, 81, 4, and 106 in those innings. And she's had this is kind of the first season she's been the opener for Hampshire. So she was at Vipers, and they had Danny Whitehodge and Maya Bouchier, who were kind of in and out on England duty. So her place in the side was dependent on whether they were in or whether they were out. And now that Danny Whitehodge has moved up to Surrey, she was given that firm run alongside Maya Bouchier as an opener. And Bouchier, also worth saying, had an incredible domestic season. At the point where they were together, McCacken outscored and outplayed Bouchier. And she was starting to be talked about as one of the ones who was going to be kind of through that England A squad and fast track through to maybe England contention.
Yeah, she wasn't having a totally dissimilar summer to what Emma Lamb was having at that time. And especially actually if you combine through the formats, and given her blast form, it would have been fascinating to see how she would have gone on the 100, because she's played a little bit in the 100 in the past, but never been given a starring role.
Yeah.
No, I think that's very good to remember how good she was, but she hasn't played for 3 months, which is devastating given how well she was playing.
Well, we had her on the pod just as she scored that 100 and just as she picked up the injury. So she hasn't actually played an innings since we had her on the pod.
Which is one of our worst curses.
Yeah.
So it was like the opposite of Davina Perrin. We had Davina Perrin on the pod not long before she played that 100 innings, and McCacken, and then she's not played since.
The only other one I wanted to throw out there, I guess it's more like a breakout star for possible breakout stardom next year. Another Durham seamer, Grace Thompson, very tall, 18 years old, played a lot for them this season, did pretty well without completely tearing things up. I imagine, is she going to be in that 30-player squad? Probably not, but I think she's someone we will see in large England camps, England A camps over the next year or so. Again, similar to the wicketkeeper conversation, there just aren't that many young new ball seamers who are really pressing forward their cases at the moment. So I think someone like her is not necessarily a long way away from being involved. Next up on the show, something a little bit different. It's a short snippet from Joe Harmon McGowan's interview with Tammy Beaumont. The full interview is on the Wisden Cricket Patreon channel. It's part of Joe's series called In the Bubble, where he speaks to players in and around the professional game about what life actually is like as a professional cricketer, or what it was like for them when they played professional cricket. Tammy Beaumont is someone that we hear a lot of in the media, not only as a player, but also as a pundit. So I was very pleasantly surprised to see so much in this chat that hasn't really been discussed hugely in the media, including Tammy's recent experience with online trolls, and Tammy explaining just how prevalent it is among the women's game at the moment and just how brutal it is for the players involved. Here's a very short snippet of that conversation. You can you can listen to the whole thing on the Wisden Patreon channel.
I think the one for me that I do struggle with at times, and I think is really unfair, it's not unfair, but it's more not dealt with properly, is like abuse online. I think that's gone through the roof the last couple of years. Look, I understand that people are now betting on women's cricket, and when you bet on me to score runs and I don't score runs, you want to say like, come on now. But you obviously had pinned pictures on Instagram, and people go on and comment on my wedding pictures and say things that my husband should do to me, or that my family should do things, or people are getting death threats, or not necessarily death threats, like I don't think they're meant as death threats, but it's like go and die. And for me, nothing is really done to prevent it. And I think I've reported a lot of comments, and it gets Instagram comes back and says it doesn't breach their terms and conditions, and you're like, how is it not? And it is constant. It's like in the 100 I was getting 100 comments when we didn't win or when I didn't perform well. And we're trying to still build brands and grow the game and interact with fans online, but for me, I'm like, absolutely not. I want none of it. I literally want none of it. So it's gone from like social media being a tool that, we used to be asked to post like, oh, we're on Sky today, everyone tune in at 2 on this channel. Like, it's gone from that, where it was like for the good of the game, to now like it's just constant abuse. And I think some of the stuff that my teammates in the 100 got, as well as myself, was utterly disgusting, that I daren't even say it. Like racist and horrendous sexist stuff. Is like horrific. And that for me, I think, is like, I find it unacceptable. And the fact that nothing's really done about it. Like if someone says like, look, your top elbow is rubbish, or like, you're not good enough, like, please, can you go and like work on it, or something constructive, which I think on the whole media try to be constructive, because people who work in sports media are normally fans of the sport. So they want the best for the England team or whatever. Like I get that. But when it's just pure abuse online, like, nah, for me, that's just like something more's got to be done, I think.
And it's something you hear more and more in sport, and particularly women's sport. Obviously, the Lionesses took a stand during the Euros recently. I mean, obviously, the responsibility lies with the people who own these platforms. But in the absence of them taking any action, do you think the game itself could do more to raise awareness, launch campaigns? I don't know really. What can be done internally to kind of counter this?
Yeah, look, I'm not sure. I obviously in the 100 I screenshotted some of it and posted it on my story, and got an awful lot of love back from a lot of people on my social media. But the general advice for us is block, report, delete. You can like block words being put in, but that's not stopping it. Like, funny enough, I got trolled by a brand new 0 followers, 0 following, brand new account, and you're like, people just make a new account to do it, so it's not necessarily helpful. I think we're educated on how to deal with it and how to prevent some of it, but I mean, the day that happened, I was ready to go to war and start my own campaign, but I just don't have the time or the energy. But I also think it's a battle you can't win unless the social media platforms are going to do something and actually listen to you. Then what can you do? But I don't know, maybe when I've got a bit more time, I could get together with some of the other women's sport athletes that have experienced similar things and try and tackle it. But I've got a bigger battle with the World Cup coming, probably.
Yeah, fair enough. And you mentioned you've kind of dipped your toe into the media yourself. You've done quite a lot of blast commentary. Is that an avenue you'd fancy going down more permanently when you do eventually decide to call it a day? And how does that tie in with the leadership in sport masters you mentioned?
Yeah, I think playing cricket's the ultimate, but one day the body's not going to do it. So getting paid to talk about cricket, I mean, what better job is there for someone who's absolutely loved the game since kind of 8 years old? And yeah, I love it. I think, particularly working for Sky, it's like a bit of a family in a way. I turned up to my first game and there's not someone training you. It was just Mark Butcher very kindly talking me through the buttons. And then, I've started having to do the odd flash interview, and, you've got Daggers and Nasser and everyone just being so kind. Owen Morgan, just always, helping you out, like Simon Doyle. They're genuinely like, want you to do well. They want the product to be brilliant. And the kind of more you get to do, the more you realize it's not just knowing about cricket, it's a real job. You've got to be listening to what's going on. You've got to listen to cues. You've got to do your research. I think it's exhilarating. I think there's, I spoke about that moment where what's happening before the audience at Lord's in that final, and that 2 seconds before you go live on air is like, almost that feeling. And I think that's something a lot of athletes have spoken, I know of that have retired, have spoken about, is that jeopardy feeling. That once you retire, you never feel it again, and you go and work a more normal job, and it's a lot more mundane, and maybe the lows aren't as low, but the highs certainly aren't as high. So I think with live TV and Sky Sports, I think that's kind of given me an insight that there's a potential for those similar feelings. And once you've done an interview and handed it back and not completely messed it up, you certainly get a pretty good feeling as well.
And finally, Katya, you caught up with the umpire, Anna Harris, who's not going to be at the World Cup. Why?
She's not going to be at the World Cup because she has too many commitments with her very real career as a doctor, a much more important career than umpiring. It's kind of, it's kind of mad how you can balance being genuinely one of the most, like the best umpires in the women's game and then also be a full-on doctor at the NHS. When we were trying to arrange a time to do this interview, she had 3 back-to-back 12-hour shifts as a doctor before a holiday. So she's in Slovenia at the time of our conversation. So her schedule just seems a bit mad.
Well, here is that conversation with Anna Harris.
Anna, great to have you on the show, and thank you so much for interrupting your holiday for us. How is Slovenia at the moment?
It's beautifully sunny, and I learnt the hard way to check the weather beforehand because I turned up in fleecy joggers from English weather.
Well, if we ever need a Slovenia correspondent, we'll definitely hit you up on that. So you were part of the officiating panel in the 2024 T20 World Cup, but you announced this week that you would not be going to the World Cup, which starts next week. What went into that decision for you?
So, for those who don't know, I recently graduated as a doctor and joined the NHS, so I started work in August. And there was a decision to be made in terms of whether I go part-time with that and extend my foundation year training, which, if you don't know, is 2 years normally, or whether I stick with full-time. And it was based on various things, allocations, the jobs that I really wanted being in second year. If I went part-time, I'd have lost them. So cricket's been winning for 21 years. I felt it was time that the sort of second career, if you will, as a doctor came first. And look, I tried to explore all avenues with the ICC. I offered them a part, turning up for part weeks of the tournament, but understandably they want umpires who are there and fully committed for the whole tournament. And I tried really hard with the NHS, but it just didn't work out. So unfortunately I had to step away from this one, sort of out of my control, sort of in, but yeah.
What's that been like then? So you've been a fully qualified doctor for a year now, is that right? Or since August?
July. So I started work in August, graduated in July.
Graduated in July. What's that been like, being a fully fledged doctor and being a cricket umpire? That sounds an absolutely insane balance.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy. My cricket season's finished now, with the last of the Metrobank game that I did. Surrey Lancs down at Beckenham a couple of weeks ago. But before then, sort of my involvement in the 100, I was using my rostered days off from work to go and do cricket umpiring. So yeah, it was a lot of travel, not a huge amount of sleep, but doing two things that I really enjoy.
What does a typical week look like for you in the season when you're trying to balance all of that?
I mean, so this has been my first season of balancing an actual proper full-time job. Before, when I was a student, it was a lot easier. It was just this year, it was basically Monday to Friday as my general working hours on the wards, and then use the weekends for cricket umpiring, and then the odd one. So if you have a 12-hour shift, for example, you do like 3 12 hours in a row, you get a day off afterwards, and then that'll be my cricket day. So just kind of squish the schedule in and around, built up some annual leave, and that's why I'm having a holiday at the moment to recover.
That sounds absolutely mad, and you definitely can't get a lot of sleep doing that. So when you became, for context, you became a professional umpire, I think in 2020. You started your journey into umpiring in 2020, am I right in that?
Yeah, 2020 or 2021, I can't remember exactly, but around then, yeah.
And how did that work in terms of, were you studying at that point?
Yeah, so I started studying 2017, 18, and then sort of restarted 2019. And I actually went part-time for my fourth year, which meant it took 2 years. And that enabled me to go to the T20 World Cup in South Africa and the one in Dubai, just to allow a bit of flexibility. The university were really good. I've been balancing sport and academics or career for a long time, being from playing it first. So you just got to be really proactive. And I've been fortunate that I've had a lot of support from both the university when I was at university at Cardiff, and also from the ECB and ICC.
I guess we hear a lot of professionals in the industry who say they always wanted to be a cricketer from a really young age, but we don't hear so much about other dreams or other kind of wants for their life that go on alongside that. Did you always want to be a doctor as well as do cricket?
No, I went to the doctor dream. I don't know, probably around GCSE time. I played with the idea of being a physiotherapist. I think a lot of sports people naturally gravitate towards that. And then I really enjoyed paramedicine and sort of explored being a paramedic. And then it wasn't until a friend's mum said, "Oh, actually you've got the grades and you could be a doctor," that I didn't realise I'd never really considered it as an option. And then after some work experience, sort of fell in love with it, and that was my career choice.
And you mentioned you had a career as a player, playing for Berkshire and in the minor counties. Buckinghamshire?
So started at Buckinghamshire, moved to Sussex, moved to Berkshire, played for Wales. So a few different ones along the way.
Yeah, around the houses a little bit. How did you get into cricket? Because your mum is quite big into cricket, isn't she?
Yeah, so actually she wasn't into cricket until after I started playing. So it was when I was about 5, and it was in junior school, rainy day. They had some quick cricket equipment, and that was it. I fell in love, went home, said, "Mum, I want to play cricket," and she signed me up. at the age of 5, and that was it. And then she got quite heavily involved. Probably a couple of years later, so when I was about 9 or 10, she started playing for our women's side because we were short of players, and so she'd come along and make a lot of noise on the boundary. And then she got into umpiring when I was probably 11 or 12, and we did our scorers course together when I was 11. And then she kind of inspired the journey into umpiring.
How do you actually become a professional umpire umpiring international matches, from thinking I'll earn a bit of extra pocket money on the weekends doing this umpiring course to now having the ability to umpire in World Cups?
I think so. I put my umpiring career, there was some good timing, but I hold my hands up. I'd say I think I was doing a pretty good job to be moved up the levels, but there was definitely some good timing involved. So Hamish Grant, who's the current officials manager, was doing a sort of recruitment drive for female umpires, and I just sort of happened to be picked up, do some regional festivals, kind of like Super Fours. And there was no clear pathway when I was making my way up through the ranks. It was kind of, you do men's cricket and then you step across, and that's kind of, your ranking is based on what you do in men's. And Hamish was sort of trying to change that, so did some of the regional festivals, went professional, or started doing the professional game in 2020, 2021, and that was born out of COVID because they needed more regional umpires, and they thought, let's bring a lot of female umpires in. So again, it was kind of, ride the wave and good timing, and then just through good performance and being available for lots of games, progressed up through. Whereas now there's quite a nice, clear set pathway for both men's and women's cricket based on the gender of the players. You can go up, if you just want to umpire men's cricket, that's fine. If you just want to umpire women's cricket, you can progress up there, or you can do both.
Do you feel like there was, or still is, an assumption that if you're a female umpire, you're going to go into female cricket and umpire women's cricket?
Yeah, I think it's a natural. And to be frank, I think female umpires will naturally gravitate towards female cricket because they may be involved in that already, and that will be the first aspect of cricket that they want to give their time back to. So is it a negative thing? No. I think there is an expectation that women will do women's cricket, but we've seen with Sue and, looking abroad, Claire Polizak, Kim Cotter and Jacqueline Williams, there's so many of the panel out there doing top level men's games. It's starting to shift attitudes.
And how do you feel about umpire? Because you've been an official in men's domestic cricket as well as women's cricket. How do you feel about balancing the two? Do you find any differences between what you need to do in the two or what you want to prioritise?
No, the approach to the game is different. So with the female players, I've played against or with quite a lot of them, and you've got that kind of rapport, and I've been around the women's game a lot longer. So on a game day, sort of the rapport aspect kind of things is less hard work, and then it's more about focusing on the game management itself, and I might manage them in slightly different ways because I've got different relationships with them. In the women's game, the ball swings a lot more, as you've seen. I mean, Lauren Bell can really get an in-swinger to go, whereas in the men's game, I'm new to them. Quite a lot of them have never met me before. You've got to start sort of from fresh and earn that respect, but both ways, and naturally they might gravitate towards your male colleague because they've been umpired by that male colleague for like 10-15 years. So, and then you've obviously got the speed element. So whereas Lauren File is probably one of or the quickest bowler, in sort of reaching mid to high 70s, men's cricketers will easily reach 80 from sort of under 18s, under 19s, and then some of them are pushing 90 miles an hour. So it's just different.
And you became the youngest official to umpire an ODI between England and New Zealand in 2021. What was that like, being on that stage for the first time, still in your early 20s?
It was really cool. It was quite surreal. It would come off the back of some 100 performances, and then again, sort of not good timing. It was an unfortunate event, but essentially there was a false positive COVID test, and I got pulled into the bubble for India the year prior or the year of to be fourth umpire, and that was my first kind of exposure at that level. But yeah, it was really cool. And what was really nice and quite touching is, so Sophie Eccleston and I used to play for England under 15s together, and when we were out in the middle, obviously super, super nervous, she's walked up to me and she's whispered, she's like, "Oh, congratulations, really well done." That was a really nice moment to sort of have the recognition from the players of making quite a significant debut. So yeah, really cool.
I guess you mentioned playing with the players and having that kind of rapport with them from before you were an umpire. But if you think about the New Zealand side in that game, there was, I think, Sophie Devine was playing, and you have all these really experienced older players than you. Has that ever been a challenge for you coming through so young as an umpire, kind of being in charge on the pitch with these really experienced players?
I think what players want most is consistency and respect. And I think what players appreciate quite a lot, and I think has helped me from being a player, is an understanding of the game, knowing when to sort of put a bit of a stop to things and when to maybe let things not slide, but sort of go a bit further than other umpires might. And cricket is a game of frustration, so where I can give a bit of slack, I will. And I think that's when you're a fresh umpire, I was quite black and white. It was follow the laws, and that's kind of what I've been taught. So what I learned from the players and then from standing with more experienced colleagues is actually, where can I give them a bit of flex, but then they know that I have got a line and they're not going to cross it. So just kind of that dialogue. Yeah, you'll get some prickly characters in cricket. You'll get that at any level. They've been playing the game probably, definitely longer than I've been umpiring. But it was a really cool opportunity.
Just sorry, listening to you talk, it sounds like a lot like of doctor stuff coming through into cricket. Do you think like your doctor stuff, or being a doctor, does kind of bleed into cricket and help you in that kind of environment?
I think it really goes both ways, actually. So, in cricket, there's two of us on field, and we are the decision makers. And since graduating as a doctor and working as a doctor, it's really helped me see the game from a different perspective, in that cricket, it's a game, and the decisions I make are probably not going to kill someone. Whereas when I'm at work, obviously there's a little bit more, high pressure and high stakes. But then at work, in another way, I'm probably I am the most junior member of the team, and there's always senior support. So it really helps both ways: communication, decision making under pressure, just having that ability to step back and try and see a bigger picture. Or, asking for help. We get taught a lot through medical school and as resident doctors. When you don't know, ask. And I think in umpiring, sometimes we can get a little bit stuck and go, well, I can't ask, I should know all of this. But actually lean on your colleague, and just a fresh set of eyes can really help with things.
How do you deal with the pressure of being someone whose decisions are constantly scrutinised? Because I think we kind of forget sometimes that umpires' decisions are them making split-second decisions in the heat of the moment that are there for everyone to criticise, with all the technology, all the angles available to them, when you've just got that one ball to look at and make a split-second decision. Yeah,
it was something that I did some work on before my first season of the 100, so the 100 when it's first year, and that was my first experience of DRS, so the review system, and I did some work with the counsellor before I started about reframing it. So instead of thinking of the technology as a tool to prove me wrong on field, it's actually there as a tool to help us as a team get the decision right, because there's nothing worse, and I think pretty much every umpire will say there's nothing worse than giving someone out and they've said, oh, I've smashed it, and you give them out LBW, and now they're stuck back in the clubhouse, and there's nothing you can do about it. Whereas with DRS, it takes the emotion out of the game, and it's not pleasant, revoking, but actually you've got the right decision in the end. So I'm not going to say that I float through every game and go, oh, I got it wrong, but no worries. Of course, there's room for improvement, and that's where the technology is really cool. We wear like GoPros on our chest, which is it's called iHawk. It's a version of tracking that's used mainly for performance selection, but it's also a good tool for tracking and maybe seeing that actually, okay, maybe I've got a trend of missing ones that are going down leg side, and then you can try and reframe and work with your coaches. So long as you're open to it. But I haven't looked at social media for a long time, because I don't really need to know their opinions.
Well, it's quite a prevalent topic this week, given what happened in the Lancashire game at the weekend. Just for a bit of backstory for those who might not be familiar, Sue Redfern has been subject to some pretty appalling online abuse this week because of a decision she made to uphold an LBW decision against Liam Livingston during the T20 Blast quarter-final, in which she was a TV umpire. At the time, Livingston was visibly angry at the decision, and since then, Lancashire have released a statement in which they formally expressed their disappointment to the ECB regarding their decision, while also criticising the online abuse Sue Redfern has received. Anna, we'll get on to whether Lancashire have actually released that statement in the first place, but you know Sue pretty well. You've officiated alongside her many times. She's probably the most respected female umpire in the world and a trailblazer for women in the industry. It's deeply disappointing to see those kinds of comments directed towards her.
Yeah, look, I mean, I know Sue, I know she's a strong character, but I know that those comments will have obviously had an impact. And I think the most disappointing thing is that it's all about gender, and women shouldn't be umpiring men's cricket. it's antiquated in my opinion, and it's a really tough job. Yeah, okay, a lot of the comments is, oh, you've got all the technology, you should get it right. But actually, it's, put the decision aside, it's still a high pressure decision. You've actually not got that long to look at it. And subject to whether an umpire makes a good or a bad decision, and I'm not making a comment on that decision. But, whether we make good or bad decisions or right or wrong decisions, one decision doesn't define the umpire, one decision doesn't define the person, and certainly gender plays no part. So I think that was the most disappointing thing. And yeah, I just, hope, I'm sure Sue will be able to, not brush it off, but, be able to get into a good mindset, because she's going to a world event. She's not being picked just because of her name and being a woman. She's being picked because she's got a fantastic track record, and the players and the umpires really respect her. So yeah, disappointing.
You said you've not looked at social media in a long time. Is misogynistic and sexist abuse on online platforms something you've had to deal with?
Not, yeah. I mean, I haven't really looked, to be honest, but there's sometimes I remember looking when I first started, and you can go looking for validation, and it's really nice when someone says, oh, Anna Harris is the best umpire or whatever. And sometimes it's it's quite funny. So I got called the Stevie Wonder of cricket umpiring, which I found quite entertaining.
Is that a compliment?
Definitely no. I mean, they haven't heard me sing either. So anyway, but I think since then there's just no value. I think the opinions that matter the most are the ones of my circle that I trust, my umpire coach, my fellow umpiring colleagues who I trust to give me an honest opinion. And then most importantly, we've got to remember that we're people at the end of the day. So my circle of friends, who some of them know nothing about cricket, and perhaps I've had, I've definitely had a 3 or 4 overturn game in my time. It doesn't make me a bad umpire. It just means I had a bad day. It's like, if a batter goes and gets 4 ducks in a row, they're not suddenly the worst batter in the world. They're just having a bad run of form. And I think people don't quite give umpires the scope to have runs of form. That's the nature of the beast.
Do you think Lancashire should have released the first part of that statement that they did when they expressed disappointment to the ECB on the decision that was made? The full statement says that formally expressed their disappointment to the ECB regarding the decision, while the club remains deeply frustrated and disappointment, and then it goes on to condemn the misogynistic abuse. Does that undermine the decision further?
It's a really tricky one, because I can understand Lancashire wanting to have a decision reviewed, and I think every club and player should have the right to have decisions looked at. It's kind of like the scrutiny that VAR comes under in football. Whether it should be released publicly, it's neither here or there. It's something that as we evolve and fans are so much more engaged on social media, and clubs are trying to put a lot more information out there, and the fans are screaming for information, it's going to be a really tricky balance moving forwards, and it will be interesting to see what comes of it. I know, hopefully, I'm sure they'll be backing Sue from the officiating department perspective. And it's going to be subject to, an investigation and independent scrutiny, so which I obviously won't be privy to. It will be interesting to see how we develop with a more online world. I think we've seen more and more sort of clips being posted by clubs, which is great for fan engagement. They love, like I say, the GoPro cameras that we have. They love the umpire cam. It's just about how we're using technology in the right way, I guess.
What more could be done to protect umpires from abuse, whether it be online or on the pitch?
Well, I know ICC at the last World Cup, they reached out to a company, I can't remember the name, mainly for players actually, and it's basically I can't remember the exact thing about it, but this technology basically filters out hateful comments on your social media, so you can't see them, you don't see them, and that's one way, and that's hiding it. And then we've seen sort of, I think the World Rugby go the other way, and they're sort of making sure that fans who are making these awful comments, sometimes death threats, are actually having some consequences for their actions. So I think again it's a really tricky one. There's so much anonymity available online. I think the ECB have really pushed for our well-being and support this year, and we've got a good network between sort of umpires, and it's kind of down to us and the relationships that we build. But our umpire coaches as well are vital. I know that I'm on the phone to mine a fair amount, sometimes just as a sounding board.
So umpire coaches, it seems really straightforward now you've said it, but I never really thought that umpires would have coaches. What's that like? What's kind of like an umpire coaching session?
So it kind of depends on the umpire coach, really. So there we have 3 at the ECB. We're very fortunate. So we've got Tim Robinson, Ian Gould, and Dennis Burns, who have all been involved in cricket officiating at really high level, the highest level. So my umpire coach is Dennis Burns, and he won't mind me saying sometimes I call him up for a chat. Sometimes we go and just have a coffee because we're both coffee snobs. And other times it will be about, my mental process and, maybe where I'm having lapses of concentration. Can we find some patterns? Can we find some strategies? Dennis has got a background in psychology, so he's brilliant for that kind of stuff. Or also, actually, maybe I'm having trouble against off spinners and trying to pick the line. Am I going to try and shift my focus somewhere else where I'm looking to try and combat that? So it's another sounding board. It's someone who's been there and done it, and somebody has your back. But also, I trust in my umpire coach specifically that he'll tell me if I need a kick up the bum.
And what's next for you? So after this World Cup, what's your next kind of assignment for umpiring?
I'm not sure, to be honest. It's sort of long-term planning. It's unlikely that I'll be able to do sort of away series because of the nature of the job. I just, as we know, you can't really take 3 weeks off the NHS in a row. So it'll be planning for next UK season, see what I can arrange. But for now, I'm going to be trying to watch the cricket on the wards and support them as best as I can. And there's some series going on at the moment, so I'm going to be tuning in to the Pakistan-South Africa series tomorrow, where Claire Polozak is for sure.
Well, cheers for joining again, Anna, and enjoy the rest of your holiday.
Absolute pleasure. Lovely to talk to you.
That is everything for today's show. Thanks, Katya. Thanks, Ben. Thanks, listeners. We'll be back next week for our Big Fat World Cup preview. Thanks to Metrobank, girls' cricket clubs can now access royalty-free images to promote women's and girls' cricket within their community.